This meeting is being recorded.
So I'm gonna record this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to RX Comedy. I'm your host, Dr. Maurice Shaw. Today with me, I have Kyle McCormick. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it.
Owner of Blueberry Pharmacy. I got two quick questions for you. Why the name Blueberry Pharmacy? Do you have like a farmer's market in the OTC section? And I noticed on your website, it says a new kind of pharmacy. Can you explain more what that means to us?
Sure, yeah. The first question is somewhat easy to answer. I didn't want it to be a last name pharmacy like McCormick Pharmacy. It just doesn't it doesn't pass off very well. Also, it's like always tied to me, for better or for worse. And common spelling questions and things like that. And then I also didn't want it to be something generic like hometown pharmacy, because there's like 50 of those in the area and whatnot. So I was talking with my wife, and we were talking about like Apple and Google, how Apple has nothing to do with computers, like it's a fruit. So I said, what are some fruits that haven't been taken yet? And she came up with Blueberry Pharmacy and Watermelon Health. And we decided that blueberry sounded a little healthier. And so it clicked, came up with the logo, it kind of stuck. Since then, I've kind of become blueberry obsessed, blue obsessed. So like recently just got a blue car. You can see blue glasses are brand new. And so last night she commented, she's like, she'd be really glad you went with blueberry, not watermelon. Everything would have to be pink then. It's like you'd have to get a pink card, pink glasses, and all that.
That's
gotta
hilarious.
commit to the brand, either way.
Well, if you ever open up or attach or work with the doctor's office, would it be pomegranate like health facility or something like that?
Yeah, we definitely can keep the berry tradition going. There's a lot of berries out there that are underutilized in branding, so we definitely could keep that going.
And then tell me more. New kind of pharmacy. Explain more to us what that means.
Yeah, so Blueberry Pharmacy is kind of the first among the new breed of cost plus pharmacies. And so we don't take insurance at all. Everything is cost plus. So we take our acquisition cost, add on a 5% markup, and then a dispensing fee. So it depends on whether a patient's a member or not. It will determine the cost plus. But in general, we say cost plus 10 is the non-member price for a 30-day supply. So we buy something at like 50 cents. The patient's looking at around a $10.50 copay. So very straightforward pricing. And what makes it different is, typical drug pricing, patients will have copays based on their insurance formulary. That may not be at all tied to the actual cost of medication, and not only copays aren't tied to the actual drug pricing that pharmacies create, are not at all tied to the cost of medication. Most list prices, or what may also be known as usual and customary prices, are in some way tied to an artificial number called AWP, or average wholesale price, and those numbers are completely made up by the manufacturer, will vary widely within a specific drug. They're specific to NDCs. So, even within duloxetine 60, there might be a range of AWP from, who knows, we were just looking at this today, like a 90 count bottle had anywhere from a $600 some AWP to a $700 some AWP. But that actual bottle of 90 only costs probably, I would venture to guess, like $2, $3 actual cost. And so if you look at list price, usual and customary, what the pharmacies submit into insurances or ask of a cash paying customer that doesn't have a coupon or something like that, you're looking at a comparably high price of for 90-day supply of maybe $500. And so we say that's nonsense. There's no reason to be charging so much on something that's so cheap. And so instead we just take something that might cost $2, $3, add on a $10 markup for 30-day supply, and come up with our price. So it's just a very straightforward way of pricing medications and bringing transparency to the pharmacy market.
Now, was that something that you always did, or is that something that you transitioned to after the reimbursement rates were so bad? Or
Yeah, so prior to opening Blueberry Pharmacy, I worked at an independent pharmacy, and I've always wanted to open my own independent, or in some way open my own business. Going back to pharmacy school, and I just saw so many trends pointing towards it not being a good idea to do so. From yeah, everything from decreasing reimbursement. That's the main one, honestly. So reimbursement's been falling for 20 plus years. I might be a little off on that exaggeration, but it's been a decade plus of falling reimbursement. And that's not to, I mean, there was definitely a point where pharmacy was making more than, you would hear the days of ridiculous signing bonuses and whatnot. But we're definitely at a point now where, and you can see it even in pharmacist pay, to go through school, come out with $200,000 debt, and then be asked for 32-hour weeks with $40 an hour pay is really not sufficient for the level of study and expertise of a pharmacist. So reimbursements fall into where it's not sustainable to keep falling. And so looking at that, I was like, I definitely don't want to open up a traditional model of pharmacy. And so some other trends I was looking at, we have generic drugs are generally deflationary. And by that, I mean, unlike a lot of things, they actually fall over time. So just talking with a patient today, they started with me in July of 2020, and her generic medication has fallen from $47 for a 90-day supply all the way to today she paid $19 for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so generic drugs deflate over time pretty much across the board. It's always actually exciting. Like patients will ask, or not so much patients because they get it, but colleagues will ask, since you're doing cost plus, prices will change as your cost changes, which is true. But actually, it generally leads to lower copays for patients. So since generic drugs fall over time, I pulled up about 4 different patients the other day to show our new pharmacist how that works. And across all 4 of those patients, what they started paying 1 to 2 years ago has actually fallen to what they pay now. So generic drugs deflate. We have falling reimbursement. And then the other big trend that I noticed was increasing costs to the patient. So patients were facing a higher upfront cost, whether that be through things like the ACA, which is higher deductible insurance plans, or just the copay structure. Patients, we regularly see $100+ copays for things like a generic Abilify or generic Vesicare, whenever the actual drug costs less than $5 for that same amount. So recognizing that, hey, these drugs are falling, but the patients are actually seeing added costs, why not just sell directly to a patient at a fair, affordable price? And so that's how I came to the idea of leaving the traditional world and opening up my own pharmacy in the cost plus model. So from day one, Blueberry Pharmacy has been a cost plus pharmacy.
Okay. I have a question. There's been so much made of this Mark Cuban pharmacy. What is the difference? Or is it a similar model?
There's not much difference. In fact, if you look back, January 13th last year is whenever Mark Cuban first launched their Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company. At the time, they launched on Twitter. Like I first saw it on Twitter, and I was like, oh no, Cost Plus, they're like competing with me. So they were the tweet that came out from Mark Cuban was, check out this Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company. We're selling albendazole for $19 a tablet. Well, I tweeted at him because I was like, hey, we actually sell it for $13. Like, because I thought we were competing. Like, I didn't realize at the moment that they were actually saying, hey, we are manufacturing this medication and we're going to sell it directly to pharmacies for $19 a tablet. And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, problem solved. Like, we already... like they're selling it higher than we actually buy it at, which so anyhow, I tweeted that at Mark Cuban, and then I guess I got shared with the CEO of the company, So from what Alex Oshmiansky told me, he said, Mark Cuban forwarded me the tweet and said, "What the heck is this?" So Alex, the CEO of Mark Cuban Cost Plus drug company, reached out on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, can we chat? Want to learn about how you are able to source it so low?" Like, he actually said, the cheapest, like the wholesale acquisition cost that we're seeing is much higher than that. And the NADAC, the national average drug acquisition cost, is like $70. So like, where are you getting this from? How are you able to do it? So didn't think that we were competitors because they were manufacturing. We were buying and then selling to patients. So if anything, I saw a good synergy there, them being a cost plus manufacturer, us being a cost plus pharmacy. The idea of being, we'll just buy directly from them. It's US made drugs at fair prices. We'll just do cost plus pharmacy on top of that. So I told him the whole business model. I told him, that we're a cost plus pharmacy. We do cost plus 10, cost plus 3 for members, how the whole structure. And fast forward to January of this year, and they launched their own pharmacy that's directly competing with Blueberry Pharmacy. Oh, so wow. How it differs is not that much different because it's actually the same model. I can't say. I mean, they probably could have come to it on their own conclusion, and maybe nothing of it was, and all related to our conversation. But I think part of it might have been.
Well, I only have 17,000 subscribers, and I think I might have 7,000 on Facebook. But we're gonna find a way to share. I'll find a way to share your stuff so that people know that you came up with it first.
Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. And it's not so much. I mean, what I've realized, I definitely was very frustrated the first week or so, mainly because it's the idea of a billionaire's name being attached to something able to get such spread. But honestly, as I've reflected on it, like maybe the past week, it's much more, hey, we were going to be going at such a slow pace and making change at such a slow pace. And, it would have been nice to get a little bit of credit, maybe a shout out or something like that. Maybe a cut a check of some sort. but the spread of change will happen much quicker. So in terms of the ability to accelerate change is much greater now. And I think we still have a competitive advantage in that we have a direct relationship with patients or in the community that they're in. So I think overall it's a net positive for the model and also for changing the landscape of pharmacy. But yeah, definitely it would be nice to get some recognition.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, if you have anything on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, I'm gonna be sure to share it on my page, and I'll put it in the description so we get the word out there that Blueberry Pharmacy is the.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Anytime a Mavericks game comes on TV, I'm gonna turn it off.
All the press releases and stuff were about billionaire Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban launches. I wanted to put I'm 6'7", and I'm horrible at basketball, so I wanted to make some kind of parody headline of terrible 6'7" basketball player launches a cost plus model or something like that.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I hope we can help you get some more recognition for it, and maybe there'll be a future partnership or something that financially beneficial for both sides.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're on. I wanted to do this podcast for two reasons. One, when I first started this channel, I just was trying to raise awareness about the understaffing and terrible working conditions in retail pharmacy, and I didn't really think that my channel would. I think I have close to almost 2 million views on all my videos. And when I first started that in the basement now, and I didn't have any followers, I never thought that I would have that many views or 17,000 followers, or I would talk to reporters from all over the country. And in the beginning, they were always asking me what is going on in the pharmacy. And now that everybody knows that retail pharmacists and pharmacy technicians are understaffed, now they're starting to ask the why. And so I took it upon myself to try to better educate myself as to why they're cutting back on labor. Some of it is to increase profits, and I'm sure a little bit of greed, but there is that whole decrease in reimbursements that from a retail pharmacist, I never saw. It's almost like the PBMs don't exist because I go in, I order from McKesson or ABC, and we have the price in the computer and it might have the dispensing fee and you see the insurance, but it's almost like the PBMs don't even exist, kind of like in my world. And so I never really thought about it. So I wanted to create this video as a way to educate the different reporters or lawyers or whoever that look at the videos on my channel and then can also see this as well. But also, too, I wanted to educate people kind of in the retail world because I got to admit, I'm not the only person who worked retail and really was. I knew of PBMs, but I feel like the more that I started to learn about them, that I really was oblivious to their role and the effect that they have on pharmacies and the patients. And, with pharmacy, it's funny. I asked on my page, what's the biggest uh, issue facing pharmacy? I think a fourth of the people said understaffing, a fourth said PBMs, a fourth said pharmacy school, and like a fourth said a lack of provider status. So I think as a profession, we're kind of like all over the place. But
Yes, we are.
I noticed the more I started to learn about it, like my state pharmacy association, IPHA, every year they have different legislation. Well, the last 2 years, especially after the Rutledge versus PCMA, they've been having legislation that will help regulate the PBMs. And all they really do is ask you for your support to fill out a form and send it to your legislators. And I was thinking, everybody in retail, this is something that we could be doing as well. Retail pharmacists, they tend to care more about the understaffing. So anytime I see my friends that work retail and there's a Bloomberg article or New York Times or some type of change.org, they're in full support. Now my friends that own independent pharmacies, they kind of don't really post all that. They usually post like screenshots of their terrible reimbursements. And so
Yeah.
so I figure like, making this video be a good way to better educate, people in the retail sector more about the effect PBMs have on retail pharmacy and maybe ways that they can also um, help legislation and support their state pharmacy association, get more legislation to regulate PBM. So I wanted to have you on and maybe you can explain a little bit more, not just for me, but just for my audience. So can you really explain to me like what is a PBM and why were they even started in the first place?
Yeah, I can't say I'm the best pharmacy historian, but from my understanding, so pharmacy benefit managers came around kind of the time of insurance coverage for medications, and it was out of a need for more medications being on the market, more expensive medications being on the market, and insurers saying, "Hey, whether it's through employers wanting to offer insurance for employees, or regardless of where the insurance is coming from, just a need for a set way to properly reimburse and account for all the different pharmacies that were filling prescriptions for those insured patients. As you can imagine, this is prior to most of the technology we currently see in pharmacy, in that it was either submitting claims into the PBM or the insurance and saying, hey, I bought this at this pharmacy and here's a label or here's a receipt from it and I need reimbursed or something like that. So you can imagine, like, prior to a lot of technology, it was kind of the idea of managing a network of pharmacies and a variety of medications, managing the formulary, that kind of stuff. So a lot of their need came out of that. And so, their set purpose is to manage formulary, contract with the network of pharmacies. They're directly tied in with the health insurers. So usually, you have, most people think of their insurance, they don't necessarily think of their PBM. So if you talk to patients, a lot of it, oh yeah, I have Aetna, or oh yeah, I have Highmark, but it's not so much thought about, oh, I have Highmark, which their PBM is Express Scripts, or I have Aetna, their PBM is CVS Caremark. You just tie it directly to the insurer. So the insurer contracts with a pharmacy benefit manager to manage those pharmacy benefits. So like I mentioned, contracting pharmacies, negotiating rebates with manufacturers, setting reimbursements, making sure all the technology kind of connects, although they're not the primary. I would say they're more from a technology standpoint. They're more checking coverage status, checking formulary benefits, adjudicating claim, all that. So there's definitely another technology entity called the switch that is involved in transactions to make sure that all that connects. But those are kind of the primary functions of the PBM. Now, if you I'm going to compare and contrast our model, which is cost plus insurance free, to the current model and kind of make an argument for why PBMs don't need to exist in the generic drug space. So I'll first kind of share an example of where PBMs do exist. So a Walgreens pharmacist shared with me a screenshot of a rejection they received from an insurance company saying ibuprofen 800 milligrams not covered by insurance. The only preferred products are naproxen 550 and a Totalac, name the strength, I don't know what it is. So as far as we know, that's kind of silly because ibuprofen 800 is super simple. Like from a safety, efficacy, they're probably somewhat equally safe. They're probably somewhat equally effective. Plus, ibuprofen 800 is as simple as 4 over-the-counter 200 milligram tablets. But if you actually get down to what the PBM is saying and what their formulary that they put together is saying, is they'd actually prefer to cover 2 more expensive products than the cheaper of the 3. So actually, if you look at acquisition cost, ibuprofen 800 is actually cheaper than either of the other 2. So this is a transaction that, if you look at, regardless of which drug of those 3 is less than $10, and honestly, the total cost is probably less than $2. And there's an entity now involved in that decision-making process that clinically has no benefit one or the other, financially has no benefit one or the other. In fact, they're choosing to cover more expensive products. So the question is, what role do they serve in that market? So our argument is that we have 700 products in Blueberry Pharmacy, and the average cost for a 30 count supply acquisition cost is $3.79. To have some entity in the middle of that transaction saying yay or nay to approval, or we decide which statin's covered whenever all statins cost less than $3.79 for 30 count, is kind of a silly thought experiment. Like, why do we have this entity involved? So really, generics, PBMs make a lot more sense in the branded and in actual insurable market space. Because there is a role for formulary management, there is a role for negotiation, all of that. You're not going to negotiate $3.79 down any further. And so really, PBMs serve their place in an insured marketplace. The problem is that the PBM financial structure right now is that they make all their money on the generic side. And the insurance market is also not set up to actually properly insure patients either. And so, to your first question, what is a PBM? That's kind of the role they purport to serve, as the benefit management, formulary management, contracting, reimbursement, negotiation function. But really, it's not, the current system is not set up to properly account for those roles.
You were talking about pricing and rebates, and I was reading something where the PBMs say it's the manufacturers is the reason why the drug prices are so high, but then the manufacturers say it's the PBMs because I believe when they make the prices, they kind of factor in that they have to basically pay a rebate to get on formulary. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's kind of like a cat and mouse. Like it's easy for one to attack the other. But you're exactly right. If we look at, Eliquis and Xarelto's of the world, there's a lot of, rebating going on, especially in insulins. I think there's some really good reports of like what is the true net cost of insulin. So net being after all the rebates to PBMs from the manufacturers are accounted for, what is the true cost of that insulin? So there's some pretty actual concrete numbers as to what that would be based on Medicare drug spend. And it's much lower. I think the number, don't quote me on this, but I think the number is actually like 70% of the list price, or 70% off the list price. So really only about 30% of the list price, which if we're talking about $300 to $500 insulin, that makes it actually quite affordable if you like look at what the net price would be. And so what you're getting at though is that take, for example, like maybe as a Xarelto and Eliquis, similar indications, similar efficacy, similar safety, similar list price. But what they're doing is for the different PBMs out there, they're essentially saying if you make ours preferred on your formulary, we'll give you X amount of rebate back. And so manufacturers like, okay, or that's what manufacturers saying is we'll give you, X rebate back. And, every year, that rebate gets increased, and therefore every year the drug price has to be increased. And the answer is probably always somewhere in the middle, in that both are at fault. Drug company wants to make more money every year. PBM wants to make more money every year. Both of them, if you look at their profits from a public stock market standpoint, both of their profits are increasing. So my simple take on that is they're both somewhat lying, and they're both, both at fault. So otherwise you'd see one of their profits going down and the other rising. So
it's funny. I was thinking about like my car insurance. I had a ding on my car, and to get it fixed would have cost me like $275 cash, but my deductible is $500, and it's like almost like all the insurances except for like pharmacy. It's like the cheap stuff the insurance will cover, but the expensive stuff they don't want to. Whereas like it's opposite for auto. The expensive stuff they will cover, but the cheap stuff, it's like, you just need to pay cash. So talking about the formularies more, when they create these formularies, is it strictly off rebate decisions? Is there any clinical decisions when they make these formularies, or is this just, hey, whichever drug we get the most rebate for, this was pretty much going to be preferred?
Yeah, and I've not seen the inside discussions. I honestly can't speak to that. Altruistically, I'd want to believe that there's definitely pharmacists employed by these companies, so I'd want to believe that there's some clinical decision making happening. But whenever you see a company like CVS, I think it was this formulary year, I think they removed Eliquis from formulary and now preferred as Xarelto. But if you look at the safety data, Eliquis is safer. And so you have the question, like, that probably was more of a rebate decision than it was a clinical decision. And with the example I shared about the ibuprofen, Etodolac, and naproxen, I can't imagine that was a safety decision. I also question whether or not it was a financial decision. I don't know who decided that. I don't know if their goal in not covering ibuprofen 800 was like, this is silly, why not just take 4 over the counter? I don't know like what their decision making process was there, because it just seems basically, the person that shared that was like, okay, what do I do now? Do I reach out to like I waste the doctor's time with the silly decision of which other NSAID to use? Like they're gonna like question the pharmacist, like, what the heck's going on? But it's like not our fault. Or do I just tell the patient to take 4 200 milligram OTC tablets instead? So yeah, I don't know truly how those decisions are made, but I just know that they're not always within the patient's best interests, or even the financial best interest of patient, payer, government, whoever.
It's funny, when I work retail, you never see the back end. At least when I was at like Walgreens, I never could see like how much money we were losing on the prescriptions. And I kind of had an idea that we probably were losing money on some prescriptions. I always used to laugh when customers would get upset and say, how much money you're making off of me. And I was thinking to myself, we're probably losing money on most of the prescriptions you're picking up, sir. But can you explain how PBMs negatively affect the reimbursements? I know a lot of times they don't reimburse at the acquisition cost. I hear a lot about spread pricing, DIR fees. Can you speak more specifically into the different ways they affect the reimbursement of a pharmacy?
Yeah. First, I kind of want to reflect back and thinking about your previous question a little bit further. You were talking about how, some things, comparing it to car insurance, and I think this is a big key takeaway of why our view of the future of pharmacy is so unique at Blueberry Pharmacy, and that, we view the future of generic drugs being bought and sold on the open, transparent marketplace that completely separate from insurance. We don't see insurance playing a role in that at all. And a lot of it actually has to do with what you're saying about car insurance. Our health insurance is not set up at all like any other insurance that we get. If you think about car insurance, we buy it in case we're in an accident, not in case we have a scratch on our car. If we buy life insurance, it's, in case we die, not in case we get a wounded ankle or something like that. I don't even like. But in pharmacy, there's this conception or misconception that, it's awesome whenever we have $0 copays on beta blockers or statins, or which is kind of incorrect. It is straight up incorrect. I believe it was one of the writers of the ACA actually said, the fundamental principles of insurance never accounted for predictable events. You don't insure against a predictable event. If you know that something's coming up and you know the cost of it, you just save for it. You don't buy insurance against it. Because that buying insurance on something like a statin that costs $3.79 a month will only increase the cost of that statin. Just like we don't buy car insurance that covers for gas or oil changes, because we know there probably would be somebody that would be willing to sell us that car insurance, but they would say, oh, you're only able to change your oil twice a year, and you can only use it at X oil changing companies. And, even with that, you're going to have a $20 per oil change copay. It's just, we know that we're going to get better price if we just go and buy our oil changes directly from the places that we want to buy our oil changes from. And so similarly, in the generic drug price world, in the generic industry, I think we're moving towards, and that's like our view of the future, is that patients will actually be better served if they're out buying their generics in an open and transparent marketplace. So not to say that we won't have coverage for patients that need help with the copays. It just won't be insurance based. So we'll have things like FSA, HSAs, or Medicare might transition more towards something like an FSA, HSA, where instead of saying these are covered by Medicaid, hey, you just get $1,000 a year to put towards your prescription drugs, and you can go out and buy them at whichever pharmacy you want to. It just makes a lot more sense that way. So, but anyhow, reflecting on your newer question, which I've
how the PBMs take money from the
yeah. So how do PBMs? So you definitely hit on a couple. So definitely decreasing reimbursement, which I honestly don't think is the primary function, like the biggest hardship that the pharmacies face anymore. Is things like DIR fees, GER fees, BER fees. So DIR is direct and indirect remuneration fees, seen primarily, I think, only in Medicare. I'm not the expert on that. Part D. GER, BER, generic effective rate, brand effective rate. And these are all fees that are assessed after the point of sale. So you essentially sell something, and then you're assessed these fees later on. They're all written into the contract, so essentially pharmacies could predict them. And in fact, more and more pharmacies are putting that into their software so they can better account for what fees will be assessed later on. But thinking through an example, or talking through an example of a recent reimbursement that I saw, a pharmacy had submitted in a claim for medication saying, this costs us $1,600. We want a $10 dispense fee. So, right around, $1,610 they wanted for this medication. If you look at what they were actually paid, the insurance company was like, okay, we'll give you $1,100, a 25-cent dispense fee. And then they were actually going to claw back $975 in DIR fees. So if you look at what was actually being reimbursed to the pharmacy, it was net maybe $146. Now, there's several things wrong with that scenario. The first of which is the medication at question was duloxetine, generic Cymbalta. And, why a pharmacy would ever charge $1,600 on a medication that actually only costs $5 is beyond me. Part of it's the pharmacy's fault. The second problem with that is really twofold. It's the fact that insurance was willing to reimburse that amount, because what that does is it actually pushes the patient into the donut hole. This is a Medicare patient. So it actually pushes the patient into the donut hole much faster. So based on how the donut hole structure is, the patient had a $0 copay, but since the plan was paying towards that $1,100, all of a sudden they're maybe two more fills away from actually hitting the donut hole, and they've actually spent zero out of pocket. So what the patient doesn't realize what's happening on the back end is that this one fill is putting them 1/3 of the way towards their donut hole. And it's a drug that would only cost them, in our model, $15 out of pocket. So I think they'd much rather pay $15 out of pocket than be 1/3 of the way towards their donut hole. But that's a different discussion. So what the PBM does is say, okay, we'll pay you $1,100, but up to 6 months away from now, we'll take $975 back. So essentially what happened was the PBM pushes the patient much faster towards that donut hole. And in the donut hole, the PBM has to shell out less money because the patient is picking up 25% of that copay. And then even better is whenever the patient gets pushed into catastrophic coverage, where the government helps pick up the cost of those medications. So the faster the patient can get, the PBM can get the patient into the donut hole and then into the catastrophic coverage, the less the PBM has to pay out. And part of that, then the other factor of is the $1,100, they didn't even pay that full amount. If you think of how that structure went, the PBM actually clawed $975 back of that as part of a DIR fee. So really, in getting that patient 1/3 of the way to their donut hole, they only had to pay out $146. And so if you look at the role of the PBM, they're not actually helping to cover medications at all. They profited $975 in that encounter. It's just crazy. So like their incentives are not at all aligned with the overall health of a patient. And so they make money via DIR fees. They make money on poorly reimbursing pharmacies. Other ways is vertical integration, which is a big problem. Monopolies are pretty rampant throughout all of corporate America in a sense. It's been a while since we've had harsh takedown of monopolistic practices, kind of since Microsoft and then AT&T, and then before that it was really since like Standard Oil and the railroads and stuff back in the early 1900s with Teddy Roosevelt. So it's really been a while since we've had a harsh environment for monopolies, and you can really see that in healthcare where we have vertical integration among companies like Aetna, CVS Caremark, CVS Specialty, CVS Mail Order, where they own this whole supply chain. So what can happen in that kind of scenario is employers sold CVS Caremark or Aetna Insurance using CVS Caremark PBM. CVS Caremark PBM says, oh, you have to use CVS Mail Order. Or you can use a retail pharmacy, but you're only allowed 2 fills, and then you've got to give a mail order. And if you ever happen to be on any specialty medications, well, it'll only be covered through CVS Specialty. So you have this whole monopoly of keeping everything in house. And whenever you have that scenario, you can actually hide a lot of financial questionable actions. So essentially, what can happen is, if you look at the list price for imatinib, which is a specialty medication for cancer, CVS, listed on GoodRx for 30-day supply. The list price there is $19,000. That is almost double the list price of any other pharmacy. And I can almost guarantee it's because they're able to. That's the price that they then charge to, whether or not nobody actually pays it, but they say that the list price when billing anybody with insurance is $19,000, and then they get some percentage of that. But since they own the same specialty pharmacy that and they force everybody to it, they can likely charge higher prices and get away with it. And so they're able to drive themselves more business, essentially, is what I'm getting at. Whereas that same imatinib prescription bought in an open, transparent, generic marketplace like a Mark Cuban or Blueberry Pharmacy only costs $40 some per month versus anywhere near the $19,000 list price that they have. And so they're just able to keep everything in-house, and it's not actually the PBM that's making the money in that scenario. It'd be more the CVS specialty pharmacy. But since they're all one and the same, they're able to, via their PBM, make more money.
I always thought it was kind of crazy because, like, let's say, example, a shoe store. You know, if you have a pair of Jordans and it's $225, when they sell that shoe, they know they're going to make $225. But in pharmacy, you sell something and you have no clue what you're going to make. And to me, that just seems crazy how there are actually still pharmacies open when you have no clue. How can you budget? How can you plan, determine how many employees you can afford if you don't even know what you're making point of sale?
Correct. And then, like, even if you do, like, even when you do point of sale, the idea of DIR and GER is like, okay, I made this much, but then 2 to 6 months later, okay, yeah, let's take out, 975. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like you said, it's not like any other retail industry. I often make that analogy to like coupons, and the idea of how coupons work within pharmacy is not like how any other coupon works. Like the fact that, in a transaction, I just used this today with a student. There's a RX Saver coupon. I don't think it still exists, but I screenshotted it where it was $1.91 for 30 hydrochlorothiazide tablets. I said, top high level, I'm already have problems with this coupon because it's essentially saying that the value of pharmacist education, $200,000 of debt, our technician's time, our label, bottle, all of that stuff, plus not to mention the hydrochlorothiazide tablets themselves, which are 20 cents of that. All of that together is only worth $1.91. Like, it's just kind of crazy high level. But then once you start digging into how that coupon works, like I mentioned, the hydrochlorothiazide tablets are 20 cents. The average cost to dispense, so the average cost for labor, overhead, all the stuff that goes into filling a prescription is anywhere from $10 to $12 per prescription. And then lastly, there's on average a $5 to $7 coupon fee. So every time a coupon is billed, the PBM associated with that coupon, the bin, PCN, all of that stuff, that PBM takes back $5 to $7 from the pharmacy. So in this coupon example of $1.91 for 30 hydrochlorothiazide, the pharmacy is actually negative $15 to $16 on that transaction. The PBM is plus $5, $5 to $7, and then they share that with the coupon company. So 50%. So the PBM has made $2.50. The coupon company, in this case RX Savers, made $2.50, and the pharmacy's out in $15 to $16. So literally, somehow the coupon companies in the PBM have made more than the drug was actually worth. It's just crazy to think how messed up. Like, no other coupon system in the world operates that way. Typically, if it's a manufacturer coupon, you send it in the manufacturer, they give you money back. Like, it's not like we're sending those into GoodRx and getting paid from GoodRx or anything like that. It's not like we just somehow accept that, and it's just ridiculous.
So you talked about how they can keep people in-house. So if CVS Caremark, you go to CVS, are they, for the same drug, are they reimbursing themselves the same way they reimburse you, or they're reimbursing themselves better?
Yeah, I think if you look, straight across the same NDC, it really depends. I think there's been hard evidence that they do, reimburse themselves better than probably like an independent. But I think overall, probably somewhat comparable in a sense. The bigger thing that happens is, the more concerning thing is really with things like their own specialty pharmacy or their own mail order pharmacies, where they're able to repackage or relabel products and create their own unique NDCs. And then for those specific NDCs that they create that nobody else has access to, they can set a new reimbursement rate for those products. And so you might see, a specific NDC that is not available for me to purchase at Blueberry Pharmacy that's just a repackaged or relabeled other product, but gets reimbursed higher than what my, NDC that I can buy gets reimbursed at. So yeah, I definitely think I've seen studies where they get, slightly better reimbursement. In general, I think all chains get slightly better reimbursement, even if they don't own their own PBM. But I think the bigger offenders where things like they can create their own unique NDCs and set their better reimbursement for stuff like that.
So I always think it's funny because, like you said, CVS, they have their own PBM. And so a lot of the understaffing, from where I understand, like at a Walgreens, is a lot of it has to do with the terrible reimbursement rate. So what can they cut on, save money on, is labor. So that's a part of the reason why they understaff. But why does CVS understaff? If you own the PBM and you're getting all the money, why are your stores so terrible? When I went from Walgreens to CVS, I felt like I had way less help than at Walgreens, which wasn't the best. And it was just mind boggling that, they were the PBM and they still, were understaffing their stores. So
it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard to be a public company in healthcare. Because if you think, whenever you're a public company, you continually have to prove yourself to shareholders. You have to increase profits, increase dividends or something in order to continue your upward trajectory as a public company. Healthcare, especially pharmacy, is unique in that, if you look only at pharmacy, the growth potential is somewhat limited. Manufacturers aside, for pharmacy, it's not like we can go out and put, like, comparing it to Amazon, where it's like, okay, Amazon can sell X number more widgets because, this year I might want to buy, a TV, next year I might want to buy, a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas in pharmacy, it's like, okay, this year I'm on one medication, next year I'm on that same medication. Like, not much growth, and yes, there's growth within, boomers getting more medication and, the aging population growing and new medications coming to market. But at the same time, there are like like I said, generic drugs are deflationary. So like that number falls. So, and to some degree, it's hard to keep showing growth every year for a public company in pharmacy. And so, to that end, the only way to, if your top line is kind of capped, the only way to then improve profits is to decrease your bottom line, your expenses, which unfortunately staff falls into. And so, it's to some degree it's definitely you can increase your profit margins if you decrease your expenses. And so I think that's one of the biggest components with it is their incentive is to do the most with the least amount of people. And so if you can, plus cynically, I think this is more my cynical take on it, is that if you can say, oh, it's so hard to staff or whatnot, we need to pass telepharmacy legislation. So now, lobbying for telepharmacy legislation because staffing is so hard and we just can't keep people. So we need to then do telepharmacy where one pharmacist manages, 10 different telepharmacies and everything's just filled by technicians and, tech or something like that, or robotic capture. So we don't actually need a pharmacy in each pharmacy. That's a cynical take on it, but like, I don't think that's, or it's also a greater, argument for automation. So, if staffing becomes hard, then it's just easier to say, okay, let's just automate some of this out. So some of those are some cynical takes, but I think that there's probably some legitimacy to them. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's they definitely have the profit margin. If you look at their profits, they could definitely hire more people or give more hours or any number of things to make life easier. I mean, COVID shots alone, I often will remind chain pharmacists that they're making $40-ish per shot. And so if you're doing like anything more than 2 shots an hour, you're padding their wallets pretty well. So because like there's a CVS pharmacist I work with pretty closely. It was like sharing how they did 60 COVID shots a day on top of their 600 some prescriptions. I'm just thinking like 60 times 40, $2,400 just in shots alone, not to mention whatever they netted in that 600 plus prescriptions. Like they could totally pay everybody a little bit better, or not so much pay everybody better, but I think what pharmacists and staff want is just more help, so they could hire more help.
So let's say there was like some PBM regulation and there was better reimbursements. Do you think that understaffing would go away, or?
In the chains, I don't necessarily think that. I think if they, if they can keep squeezing more work out of fewer people, they will keep squeezing more work out of fewer people. There's little incentive to do anything but maintain the status quo unless people speak up enough to challenge that status quo. So I think what you're doing is great. Other pharmacists like Bled and I'm trying to think. Yeah, she's probably the most outspoken on top of you. So I think it takes a lot of pharmacists speaking up for ourselves to really ask for that change, because otherwise, no, I don't really see much changing. If pharmacies are not speaking up and they're doing 660 scripts with a day with only 2 hours of overlap and one technician, well, then they'll just ask for 670 prescriptions a day. They're not going to say, here's more staff. It's just like, okay, you did that just fine. Let's add 2 more scripts on, and then we'll just be adding on 2 more scripts until somebody breaks.
So let's say I'm a retail pharmacist or a pharmacy technician. Like, what can I do to help regulate PBMs? Because it's almost kind of seems like when you're in the retail world, like, well, what can you do about it? Like supporting your state pharmacy organizations, contacting your legislators. Like, what would you recommend is the best route for somebody working retail pharmacy to help with PBM reform?
I think number one is education. And I think one of the biggest things we don't learn about in pharmacy is actually the economics of pharmacy school. And one of the biggest things we don't learn about in pharmacy school is the economics of pharmacy. And that if we don't understand how we get paid, then I don't know how we could, advocate for, advancing the profession or changing the profession in any way. So that's one of my biggest things is we have to understand the flow of money within the profession to better understand how we can change the profession. So to that end, I think one of the biggest things is all of us learn a little bit more about PBMs. And honestly, I'm not the expert either. There's people like Benjamin Jolly, Luke Slindy, any number of independent pharmacy owners that know way more about PBMs than I do. So I think the biggest thing is just like learning about those. Second thing would be advocating for, I want to encourage, I definitely would think there's a lot that can be done at the state level. So definitely state advocacy is probably the best. If you think like things like what's happened in Arkansas, some of the scrutiny in Ohio, definitely things happen faster at the state level. So state advocacy is probably key. I also am somewhat cynical in that with our model and our vision for the model, is we truly believe there's no role for PBMs in the generic drug marketplace. So as much as I want PBMs to be better regulated and for them to, honestly, I just want them to not exist. And so I think the quicker we get to the realization that they literally serve no function in the generic drug marketplace, the quicker we realize that there are models that can exist where we don't need to worry about their regulation because they won't be there anymore. And so honestly, I think that that's my biggest hope, is that we just realize there's no role for them in the generic drug marketplace, which is 90% and growing of the drug marketplace as a whole. Generic drugs make up 90% of all prescriptions filled. As Eliquis goes generic, as Xarelto goes generic, as the insulins go generic, or biosimilar, just become more affordable in general. Just it'll make a lot more sense for everything to be bought and sold openly. So
I hear sometimes people talk about a single PBM model. Can you explain that? I don't necessarily know what that means. I know some people say we don't need them; they shouldn't exist. I hear sometimes, a single PBM model would be better. Can you explain that a little bit further for me?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what we view the function of the PBM being. Single PBM, I would assume, I've not heard that too much, but single payer, I think, is probably what it would probably be closest to, is the idea of like a single payer for healthcare, which I honestly then would believe probably doesn't even necessarily need a PBM either. Essentially, what we need for the most part is a single, like a formulary. I think if we had like a gold standard formulary, plug it into almost an API and basically just let it run, it would take care of most of the functions of a PBM. And from a PBM standpoint, like single PBM, if PBM assumes insurance, and I just really don't believe we need insurance for things that are so cheap. However, if we're talking about payments, which would be different than insurance, we would still possibly need some kind of payment entity, but all those processors already exist in the form of Visa, MasterCard, all of those. And so if government wanted to have a single payer system that paid for even such thing as a generic, they could still do it without the need for a PBM. They would just say, okay, here's your single payer FSA card loaded with, based on your disease states, the amount that we think you would need for the year. Go utilize it, and anything you don't need will be either funneled back into the government for decreasing costs overall, or funneled over to other patients that may have overspent or something like that. It's just, I feel like, somewhat cleaner use of funds, but it's neither here nor there. So.
Well, I encourage everybody to get more involved with their state pharmacy association. I know here in Illinois, I've been more involved with the Illinois Pharmacists Association. And I love the fact they send me emails, especially like the last 2 years. Here are the 2 bills that we're pushing to help regulate PBMs. Can you, fill out this form and, contact your legislators that you want them to support this bill. So I highly recommend everybody else to do that, as well as, continue to support people like Bled, Accidental Pharmacist, myself, and whoever else on trying to improve working conditions in retail pharmacy. Kyle, I would like to thank you so much for coming on here. This was very informative for me. Hopefully for my subscribers, it was also informative. If people want to follow your social media, maybe support your fight against the Mark Cuban thing, where can they follow you at? On LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook?
Probably LinkedIn is most pharmacy specific. Twitter, I go more towards Web3 and cryptocurrencies and blockchain than I do pharmacy. But you're certainly welcome to follow me on Twitter as well. But yeah, probably LinkedIn is the best for pharmacy focused things.
LinkedIn under Kyle McCormick. Do you have like a Facebook page for Blueberry Pharmacy?
Yeah, Blueberry Pharmacy under Facebook and LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay. As always, Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And please subscribe and leave a comment in the video in the comment section. And I'll put in the description section how you can links to Kyle's social media handles. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Maurice. Record.